Welcome back to Theology on Ice. I am your host, Sean D. Gates, and today's episode will be spent offering a brief update on life, an explanation for my absence, and just some of the things that you can expect going forward. So, dear friends, I invite you now to pull up a chair, light your cigar, and grab your drink so that together we can begin to pour some theology on ice. It has certainly been a while since my last podcast episode, but now I'm in a season of life where I want to begin documenting my journey again, and I plan to be much more consistent with it now. So over the past year, I have really been wrestling with some different things and getting to know myself a little bit better. During this time, I've had the ability to sort of deconstruct my faith and reformulate my thoughts on a lot of things. Now I know, especially for myself, that the word deconstruct in reference to religion and faith definitely sets off the little red buzzers in my brain. And I want to reassure you that I am still very much a firm believer in Jesus Christ, and I have no intention, nor have I ever had even as much as the thought to abandon my faith. Rather, this time of deconstruction has been more oriented toward a reevaluation of specific theological stances that I have previously held without much research or study, albeit ignorantly. So that's partly why I haven't been making podcasts, because I've been taking the time to make certain that I believe what I believe based on real educated study and not simply preconceived notions and bias. Now, in this episode, I would like to share a few things with you that have come to pass during this time. First, since nearly all of this podcast has revolved around my journey down the Canterbury Trail, I want to discuss where I am right now in Anglicanism, theologically, in terms of ecclesiology, and in my right now day-to-day, week-to-week practice. Second, many of you who know me personally are well aware of my past in Calvinism, and I've mentioned on this podcast before how I plan to obey the Lord's call to go to seminary, and the seminary that I was feeling led to was Calvin Theological Seminary. So I'll discuss all updates in that regard. And then finally, I will talk a little bit about where I am now and what I'll be doing for the next few years of my life and where I hope it will lead me. So let's go ahead and jump in. Number one is Anglicanism. To start off this section, I will recap my theological journey from over the past few years. 18 months ago, I was a Reformed Calvinist, fully affirming of the 5 points of the acronym TULIP. 15 months ago, I was introduced to the Anglican Communion. 13 months ago, I decided to begin my journey down the Canterbury Trail. 10 months ago, I directed my studies toward the pursuit of ordination to the priesthood in the Anglican Church of North America, ACNA. 7 months ago, where our story kind of picks up today, I was encouraged to reevaluate my perspective on the Roman Catholic Church, and I became convicted of much of her truth. 5 months ago, I began a college course on Anglican history and polity. 1 month ago, I finished my bachelor's degree, and at the present, well, to say the least, things are complicated. While much of my heart may kind of belong to Rome, the hearts of my family and my loved ones remain a lot more closer to home. As I said, I was invited to reevaluate my perspective on the Roman Catholic Church. The way that I got here is pretty simple. When you go online and you search Anglican, or even when you tighten up the search to ACNA, you'll find very little content to consume. Of course, there are great theologians and authors like J.I. Packer, C.S. Lewis, N.T. Wright, and people of that regard, but I personally really enjoy podcasts and short YouTube videos that can help introduce topics that I'm unfamiliar with in an easily digestible way while I'm at work or something, before I then go on to the higher resources, just to give me an introduction. So along with that, and I've mentioned this here before, Anglicanism is kind of a via medium, the middle way between low church evangelical Protestantism and high church sacramental Roman Catholicism. Essentially, it's the Roman Catholic Church that embraced the Reformation. So growing up Protestant and low church at that, I'm familiar with a lot of the Protestant Reformation, the views that Anglicans hold, Even being a Reformed Calvinist, I engaged with much of the Reformationist views and ideals of Luther and Calvin, as well as Thomas Cranmer and Richard Hooker. So, as someone new to Anglicanism and with a hunger to learn all that I could, I quickly discovered I knew a lot of one side of the Anglican coin, the Protestant side. But it was the high church, liturgical, sacramental part of Anglicanism that I was lacking understanding about. I wanted to know why vestments? Where did smells and bells come from? What's the nature of holy orders? What are the sacramentals? Who are the saints, and what is the apostolic tradition? Those were the things I was searching for. So eventually, YouTube University, Apple Podcast Seminary, and Instagram Institute of Theology kind of just flooded my For You page with all of the answers to these burning questions. But here's the kicker. Remember, I mentioned that there simply aren't many Anglican ACNA resources for these things. So naturally, all of the answers and the content that I was receiving were strictly Roman Catholic. I admit at first I was kind of off-put by this, and I wanted to disprove it through the lens of the English Reformation. However, there's a lot of sense that comes with arguments of the church that have been around for about 2,000 years, and it became more difficult for me to discredit what I was taking in. I got to a point where I was listening to Pints with Aquinas by Matt Fradd, shout out to him with the Daily Wire now, and Jimmy Akin, Trent Horn, Joe Heschmeyer from Catholic Answers, as well as Scott Hahn and Jeff Cavins, Bishop Barron, Eric Ibarra, and eventually I just got to a point where I was convinced that the Catholic Church was the one true church established by Jesus Christ, of which St. Peter was the first pope, and perhaps I swung the pendulum a little too far. The past few months have been interesting, navigating through these waters. There's quite a lot of details, obviously, regarding this portion of time, from which some of them are personal, and others I've been quite open about. In the interest of time, I'm kind of skipping over most of these, and simply I just want to say that at the end of present day, I am not a Roman Catholic, and I don't necessarily plan to be. However, this has certainly impacted and influenced my quote-unquote Anglicanism. For example, I do believe that there is a uniqueness to the authority and the role of the chair of St. Peter, the Bishop of Rome. Many Anglicans share this view, recognizing him as a spiritual authority, but not necessarily the Pope in the way that Vatican I has claimed. So there is overlap there. Though I do know that Thomas Cranmer, I think it was him, he mentioned how the Pope is the Antichrist, was one of his kind of inflammatory statements. So there is a little bit of contention there. However, there is overlap in a reverent view of the papal office. I believe also firmly in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Anglicans can agree on this point, though the 39 Articles of Religion in Article 28 of the Lord's Supper, it says, quote, transubstantiation, or the change of substance of bread and wine in the supper of the Lord, cannot be proved by Holy Writ. It is repugnant to the plain words of Scripture, overthroweth the nature of a sacrament, and hath given occasion to many superstitions. End quote. To me personally, I think transubstantiation makes the most theological sense. So I have a bit of a difference here. But ultimately, I can vibe with the fact, and I can submit to the fact, that however it happens, Jesus is truly present in the Eucharist. So there is still that overlap with the ACNA. In terms of faith and works in regard to salvation, I think that Catholicism and Anglicanism really are not quite as at odds as they think they are. But ultimately, I do believe that works are, in a sense, necessary for salvation. I often hear the sermon illustration that, and this was also explained to me by a good friend of mine, Sammy. Shout out to Sammy. I won't say his last name in case he doesn't want to be known for this, but that salvation is God offering us a free $100 bill. So, God extends this free gift, but then it must be accepted, and that's faith. So God extends the offer of salvation by the blood of the Lamb, the $100 bill, and all we must do is believe and accept it. However, Sammy expounded upon this, and this is what really struck home for me, is the idea that it isn't a $100 bill as much as it's like a $100 check. So yes, it's free, and yes, you must accept it, but you also have to go cash it. Otherwise, it's just a worthless piece of paper. Christ's sacrifice is meant to initiate full life change. You are supposed to live differently. Otherwise, your faith is dead, as St. James points out. So rather than faith alone, I would amend it to we are justified by grace alone, this gift that we didn't earn, but that grace is infused into us by both our acceptance that it is true, faith, and our changed lives, living into that truth by availing ourselves of the sacraments and going to church, etc. works. So some Anglicans may disagree with me, but I do believe that this view has a seat at the table within the realm of Orthodox Anglicanism. More on that later, I'm sure. But some other things that I'll go ahead and throw in here, and perhaps I'll do an episode on this in the future, is that one, I believe it's okay, though not necessary, to ask for the intercession of the saints and to venerate the Blessed Mary, ever Virgin. On the topic of Mary, I do believe in her perpetual virginity and grant her the title of Theotokos, meaning Mother of God, because she was the mother of Jesus and Jesus was God, thus she is the God-bearer. It's not a claim that she's co-eternal or equal to God, but simply it goes back to the Council of Ephesus in the 400 AD era and it acknowledges the deity of Christ. I also think it's possible, after studying the gospel according to St. Luke, that she was conceived without sin. That would be the Immaculate Conception. And that it's possible she was assumed into heaven after her death so that her body would not be touched by decay or rot. Thus, the reason that we have no relics of Mary. Even this, however, I think can be tastefully married within the Anglican view, though it's a little trickier to do that with the Immaculate Conception. Please don't see me as trying to sidestep around Anglicanism and manipulate it to fit into what I want it to be. This is me simply trying to be honest with myself, and just be clear with what I think, what I believe, and trying to wrestle with how it fits in with the ACNA. So lastly on this point, to clarify again, I am not a Catholic. It's taken some time to get here, but right now, for those of you who may be wondering to yourselves, okay, then what are you? I would answer, I'm still choosing to view myself as a Christian in the Anglican tradition. I do not plan to pursue Catholicism or the Anglo-Catholic Church, but I am confident and comfortable in residing in the ACNA and making that work for me and my family. I'm not currently a confirmed Anglican, so the differences that I do have in theology from the ACNA don't seem to sit at odds within me at the present, simply because I'm not tied to the denomination through confirmation. But I'm going to remain honest with myself and with you and just take you along this journey with me as I do hopefully one day seek confirmation in the ACNA, and just how I can marry the views that I have with the ACNA and also submit to their teachings and authority. So now let's go on to one of the other 3 points. Point number 2. I promise the next 2 points are not going to be nearly as long as this one. So number 2 is John Calvin. To answer the question I'm sure is burning upon your hearts. But Sean, aren't you a Calvinist? The answer is no, not really. I do remain convinced of predestination, but this view is not necessarily the same as Calvinism. Rather, I'm in alignment with what Article 17 of the 39 Articles of Religion say about it. I won't read it now, though I can try to remember to paste it in the show notes for this episode for your reading pleasure. But all you really need to know is that my view of predestination is not quite what comes to your mind when you think of 5-point Calvinism. That said, I do believe we are depraved and that God is completely sovereign over all things, including salvation. I do believe that in some mysterious way, God allows all people to have the choice to follow and obey and enter into his friendship, as well as to reject him. So more on this at another time. But now, the Calvinism question, though I am not necessarily a Calvinist, it hasn't lost its relevance. You see, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, and even earlier in this episode, I firmly believe God has called me to go to seminary. Additionally, I believe that the seminary he has led me to is Calvin Theological Seminary. Of course, there's many of questions regarding this that I even still have. However, Even with some of my Anglo-Catholic leaning thoughts and beliefs, I harbor no ill feelings for my Calvinist friends, and I remain deeply affected and thus affectionate for the Reformation ideals. I am delighted to find that there are a handful of Anglicans already at Calvin's seminary, which is where I am now as I'm recording this episode. I am living in student housing at Calvin Theological Seminary, and that leads me to my third and my final point. Number 3, the winter wonderland. So if you know me and have retained all of the information that I have given over the previous episodes of this podcast, you'll know that I'm from the middle of Kansas. And if you know anything about Calvin Theological Seminary, you'll know that it happens to be located much further north in Grand Rapids, Michigan, otherwise called the winter wonderland. Sorry, I got those swapped. As such, a few weeks ago now, my lovely wife Kerrigan and I have made a 13-hour move, and we now live in Michigan. I am officially a troll, according to Michigan slang, referring to those who live under the Mackinac Bridge, essentially the lower peninsula of Michigan. We definitely chose probably the worst time to make the move, the dead of winter, but the Lord was gracious enough to hold off on the snow, at least until we were unpacked. Over the past week, I think we've gotten a little over 2 feet of snow, so none of the heavy lake effect snows yet, but I know that they're coming. I feel it in my bones. It's going to be cold. It's certainly cold now, but I actually kind of like it. There's something nice about just watching the snow fall constantly. But anyway, I will be starting seminary at CTS this spring 2026. I'm already enrolled in classes, and I have my first day of school this coming Monday, which is January 26th, in case you're curious as to when I'm recording this. I'm taking 4 classes: Mission of God in the New Testament, Story of Christianity 2, which looks at church history from like the 14th century up to present day, Forming Worshiping Communities, and Revelation. So you can expect some episodes on eschatology coming up in the next few months. Though I'd like to wait until I have a bigger, deeper understanding of Revelation before I kind of try to tackle any sort of topic like that. But lastly, my final update within this Michigan season of my life is that I have found a church here in Grand Rapids. Just a few miles north of us is an ACNA parish called Christ Church Anglican. We visited it this past Sunday, and we just absolutely loved it. We plan on continuing to go there weekly for a few reasons. The congregation was super friendly. We met a bunch of kind people right away, and it was also fairly high church. The music was more traditional, and we even chanted the Psalter for the week. The rector, Father Chris Rolls, he seems like an amazing guy. I've been able and blessed to chat with him over the phone a few times now and meet him in person on Sunday. I can already tell that he's the kind of shepherd who really cares for his sheep. Now, I mention this parish because it is my goal to keep attending here, thus remaining securely in the ACNA, and since my seminary will take at least 3 years start to finish, we have the potential ability to become confirmed as Anglicans in this particular parish, which would be a huge next step for me and my wife. That's pretty much it for this entire update. Going forward, I hope to be more consistent and to engage frequently with matters of theology and to share with you my seminary journey, as well as my progress on the Canterbury Trail. Thank you for listening to me babble. Please come back next time. I can't necessarily say next week because I don't know, but next time for sure. Please feel free to leave a comment on a topic of conversation that you would like to see discussed further, or just any questions that you have for me. In the meantime, God willing, I will be back with another episode soon, and at that time, as always, I will invite you to pull up a chair, light your cigar, and grab your drink so that together we can pour some theology on ice. God bless.